In a world where anything is possible, in a world where the normal and the paranormal reside, Almost Unbelievable brings to you the stories you want to hear, but fear to hear. Join us in the pit.
You have joined the Almost Unbelievable Paranormal Podcast, and you have also joined the end of Season 1. So, for all of you that are sticking around, glad to have had you stick around, but here we are, we're at the end of the Season 1, and we're ready to go with another story. So, I'm Ranty. Are you there, Kat?
I am here, and you brought up the fact it's the end of the season. We've been gradually gaining listeners as the season has gone on. So, if you do want to get your fix of Almost Unbelievable over the next couple of weeks, and you're a fairly new follower, then go back and check out our back catalogue. All our episodes are there on all the streaming services, one of the two. And we're not going to be away for too long at all, are we, Ranty?
No, we should be back in about a month or so. I wouldn't think it would be any more than that. And we've still got to do the Easter special, which is coming out this Sunday. So if you want to tune in on YouTube, we will be live there on Almost Unbelievable. That's it, just Almost Unbelievable on YouTube. So check us out and you can listen to the Easter stream live. And I think we're going to upload that one to Zencaster and the like. So yeah, looking forward to it.
Yeah, should be good. So, as is tradition, should I tell you a little story before we get into this week's podcast?
Go on then. I'm all ears, Kat.
Now, I'm sure that you have heard of Abraham Lincoln.
Yes.
And I'm sure that you will have heard of John F. Kennedy.
Yes.
But have you heard about the amazing string of coincidences that tie the two individuals together?
Nope, can't say I do. Well, presidents? That's the only thing I can think of.
Well, there's a few more than that. Here we go. Abraham Lincoln was elected to Congress in 1846. John F. Kennedy was elected to Congress in 1946, so 100 years apart. Lincoln was elected president in 1860. John F. Kennedy was elected president in 1960. The names Lincoln and Kennedy each contain 7 letters. They were both particularly concerned with civil rights. Both of their wives lost their children while they were living in the White House. Both presidents were shot on a Friday. Both were shot in the head. Lincoln's secretary was called Kennedy and warned him not go to. Lincoln's secretary was actually called Kennedy and warned him not to go to the theater where he was assassinated. And Kennedy's secretary was called Lincoln, who warned him not to go to Dallas where he was assassinated. Both were assassinated by Southerners. Both were succeeded by Southerners. Both Southerners were named Johnson, the ones who succeeded him. Andrew Johnson, who succeeded Lincoln, was born in 1808. Lyndon Johnson, who succeeded Kennedy, was born in 1908. John Wilkes Booth was born in 1839. He was the guy who assassinated Lincoln. Lee Harvey Oswald was born in 1939. Obviously, we know who he assassinated. Both of them were known by their 3 names, and both of the names are comprised of 15 letters. Booth ran from the theatre and was caught in a warehouse. Oswald ran from the warehouse and was caught in a theatre.
Get out of here. Yeah. I'm sorry, but this is ridiculous. It's true.
It is true, yeah. And both, Booth and Oswald, both of them were assassinated before their trials. Now, what do you think of
that? Well, I tell you what, for all those people out there who are conspiracy-minded, I would definitely say that there's probably, if your fate's already written and all this stuff is written down, then, that just cannot be coincidence, surely. Come on.
I've been aware of the Lincoln-Kennedy coincidences for a number of years. What I haven't done is ever try to debunk them. I do like my coincidence stories. Maybe another time I'll really dig deep into them and see which ones have been slightly morphed to make the story sound more unbelievable, if you like. But no, there was an awful lot of coincidences between the two. I love that story. It's a great one.
I'm just blown away. It was like the car, the little bastard car. That seemed to never end, and this was the same. I mean, come on.
I know, amazing. I did want to ask though, do you know where Kennedy was buried? Because I'm not so sure.
I think it's Arlington Cemetery, if my memory serves me correct. Anyway, I think that's where it is.
Well, what another coincidence? Because doesn't today's guest have something to do with Arlington Cemetery?
Yeah, indeed she does. And she used to work at the cemetery. And as you've already seen with the title of this podcast. We've called it The Confederate Ghosts of Arlington Cemetery. So, without further ado, we shall let Meg tell the story, and we'll take it away from there.
Yeah, thanks so much. So, back in the early 2000s, I was a certified tour guide in Washington, D.C. and Arlington National Cemetery. And I'm an empath, I'm a sensitive. So, the sensitive kind of psychicness runs in the family. It goes back generations. We're aware of spirits, we acknowledge spirits. So, I love a good cemetery. I'm a little bit weird. I was very excited to be offered the closing shift at the cemetery. And the closing shift is something that you're not supposed to like, but being all into things that go bump in the night, I was excited. Basically, you take this tram that you give the tour during the day around kind of the main drag, the perimeter, and you look for people that maybe didn't know the cemetery was closed or were hiding for whatever reason. And so we'll get out of the trams, go look around behind trees, make sure all the teenagers from their tours with their schools are gone. And so I'm going with the only driver that would do the closing shift. We'll say her name is Dottie. And she was just so fun, so spunky. And, everyone at the cemetery knows their spirits, but some of them don't believe in it. And Dottie, I asked her about her favorite spirits. I was trying to get to know her. I was new. And, I pushed. I was like, okay, tell me all about the spirits. And she's like, I don't believe in spirits. I was like, okay, well, tell me your favorite story that you've heard. So she tells me about this ghost that's on the closing route and allegedly is a Confederate soldier. And she's decided to forgive him for that. But, she's been hearing of his story since she started at the cemetery 20 years ago. So I asked her, can you show me where he is when we go past it? And I was like, surely she's trying to prank me. She doesn't believe in ghosts, but I'm just going to go with it and have fun. So she would drive us along the perimeter of the cemetery until we're basically on the western border, which is by a military base called Fort Myer. And there's a Confederate Memorial at Jackson Circle. And the memorial is a little bit different than the way the graves are laid out normally. You can definitely tell what it is because they're in a concentric circle instead of in rows. And so, we're driving along and it's actually chilly once you get in that area. And summer in Washington, D.C. is nasty. It's sticky. It's humid. But there's a chill in the air. And I thought that was interesting. There's no birds or anything nearby. In different parts of Arlington, you'll hear birds. And then in some others, there's just no birds, no insects. It's just dead silent. And so I was like, oh, okay, this feels a little different. There's this sort of pressure as you get closer to it. And I was like, maybe it's in my head. She's setting me up for this. And so I asked her, okay, what am I looking for? What should I keep an eye out for this ghost? She goes, oh, you'll know when you see him. He's shy, but he'll get used to you. And as we drive past, she yells out, "Good night, boy," out the window. And we just keep going. And this happens the second night and the third. And nothing happened. She just yells out the tram window. And then the fourth night, it was closer to the 4th of July. And we're cruising towards Jackson Circle and the Confederate Memorial. And I hear drums. And so I immediately think Fort Myer has a military band called the Old Guard, I believe. The Old Guard's band, I should say. And they're the ones who do all the drums for the funerals at Arlington. So my assumption was, oh, the band's practicing really late. That's weird. And she just says, oh, the band would never play that. And I was like, okay, whatever. She's being weird again. And so we get to the certain point where the air kind of shifts and you don't hear birds anymore. And it's heavier and I get goosebumps. And I'm listening to the drums. You can still hear them. It's one drum now. And I'm like, that's weird. Usually it's multiple drums. And then I just get this sick feeling because I recognize the song. And it's Dixie. Dixie is a Confederate song. It's something that the Confederate drum corps would have played. It's nothing the current military band would have ever considered playing because the Confederacy, they lost. So I look at Dottie and I'm like, hey, that's Dixie, isn't it? She goes, yes. I was like, are you messing with me? Like, this isn't funny. She goes, no. I'm like, so that's coming from the Confederate Memorial section. That's your ghost. And she goes, oh, no. He's not mine, but yes, that's him. And I was like, okay, Dottie. And I asked her to stop the tram. She's like, you're going out there? Like, out there to look? And I was like, okay, yeah, this is fishy. And I was like, yes, I'm definitely going out there to look. She's like, okay, weirdo, I can see it in your face. You know what this is, but go ahead, do your little sweep. Make sure that none of the teenagers from this morning are out there. And so I go and I jump off the tram, and it's horribly awkward because we're in these like 1940s uniforms and pencil skirts and high heels. So I like hobble around trying to be respectful and not step on graves. And as I get closer, the goosebumps get bigger and the drumming just stops. And so I stop and I'm like, hello, is anybody there? And of course, nothing answers. Nobody answers. So I walk around the memorial. It's in a circle. So I just walk around. There are no trees nearby, so there's nowhere for kids to hide. And I'm like, okay, you know what? I'm just going to keep going. So I go and I'm about 180 degrees around, and the drum does a little snare. And I'm like, what the heck? And so I run back around to the other side, and there's nobody there. I look for speakers. I look for anything that Dottie could have used to mess with me. But the goosebumps are so big, and it's cold, and it's 90 degrees in DC, and I'm cold. And so I say, what's your name? And there's nothing, no answer. And I say, hey, I didn't mean to scare you. I'm so sorry. I liked your drumming. You're very good at it. And no answer. I was like, okay, I'm going to leave you be. You have a good night, okay? And so as I'm walking back, there's this rush of this cool breeze against my back as I'm leaving, and it doesn't shake any of the trees in the distance. It's just against me. And as I exit the concentric circles of graves, the drumming picks back up. And so I walk right back onto the tram. I don't look behind me. And Dottie is just smug as hell, grin on her face. And I was like, you said you didn't believe in ghosts. She goes, no. You came to that conclusion. I just don't have to believe in them because I know they exist. I've worked here and I've learned that there are so many ghosts and they will work here long after me. And so I don't go out of my way to bug them like you do. But lucky for you, he's one of the nice ones. He's a good kid. He minds his business. He stays there. So, I think he just gets lonely. And I was like, wait a minute. So Dottie, the reason you do the night shift is because you're saying goodnight to all of the ghosts? She goes, yeah, somebody has to. I was like, okay, I'll add that to the checklist. And then we drove out of there. And for the 3 years I worked there, whenever I did closing shift, we would always yell goodnight out the window at that spot.
That was a fantastic story. That really was. I really, really enjoyed that. And I've got so many questions about it. The first one's got to be, you seem like to you now that's all normal. It's all normalized. Do you not feel freaked out in any way about it?
I think because I grew up in a family that just a bunch of sensitives. So, walking, my mother works in cemeteries. My grandmother worked in cemetery. It was just normal for me. So I guess I don't have the normal reaction of, oh man. I mean, if something's dark and a mean or I don't want to say evil, but malintent energy, I do get freaked out. But there was nothing scary or evil about this sort of experience. So it was just like, okay, cool.
What's really weird about this story is that it seems that all the people that work there just seem to treat it like, oh yeah, it's just this person or that person, like they're still living. It's like the way you've talked about it. It's like you're talking about a family member or friends of yours or things like that.
Yeah, it's very interesting, and they're all very protective. They wouldn't even talk about the other ghosts in the cemetery until I'd been there a year. And it's very much their family, their extended family, and they feel it was their job to protect them. And it became my job to protect them while I worked there.
This is fascinating. It's just the way you talk about it so protectively and so matter of fact. Like, yes, these ghosts are here. They are lingering around. They're real. I mean, I'm blown away. I'm actually just blown away by how matter of fact all of this is.
Yeah. And do your colleagues, because it sounds like the colleagues are all the same. Your colleagues are all that this is normal. This is just everyday occurrence.
Yeah. The Confederate soldier there was probably the most consistent. Drummers in the Civil War were younger. So, the assumption is that he's under the age of 13, right? And he's just a kid. And so we're adults. We're the protectors of the cemetery. It's our job to make sure he's okay.
How many ghosts would you say there are there then?
Oh, I would not speculate. I mean, there were, when I was there during Operation Iraqi Freedom and Enduring Freedom. So on average, there are 25 burials performed a day in Arlington, but when I was there, it was almost closer to 30. So you got to assume there are quite a few spirits walking around or inhabiting Arlington.
So outside of work, you've said you were sensitive. So outside of work, what are your experiences with? I don't know. What would you call them? Would you just call them ghosts?
I like spirits. I don't know. Ghosts just, it sounds a little gimmicky. Spirits or energy. I'm a big history buff, so I like to go visit. I'm asking for it, I guess. I like to go visit historic places. So I always am prepared to have an experience. You have to, as a sensitive, set up, I guess, mental protections. You don't want to be overpowered or negative things to enter your personal space, but you also want to be respectful. You know, they're lingering for a reason. So I've never not run into spirits at historical sites, with very few exceptions. I've been to Gettysburg, Battle of the Wilderness. Those are Civil War battles, which was a big deal over here in the US. And even when I visit, you know, the UK, if I'm wandering around a cemetery or anything, there's always that moment where I know there's something else there. I don't know what it is, but it's always around.
Yeah, I know what you feel, especially when you go into these cemeteries. We've got one local to us, and some of the headstones there, I think they're around about 12 feet tall. In fact, most of them are in this particular graveyard, and I didn't even know this thing existed, this graveyard, until recently. And I walked around it, and you just get this feeling when you're walking around it. It kind of throws you back to those times. It's weird. It's like the headstones would say 1850 or 1820, and you actually feel different in the cemetery. It's hard to explain. It really is.
But
especially the
I
older ones.
Completely understand. Yes.
And I love it. I love going looking for, just like you. I'm definitely just like you. I love going and exploring and hoping to bump into things and wishing things would happen to me. And a lot of things have happened to me. But your story is just incredible. The fact that you've actually got sort of like names for these ghosts or spirits, and just crazy.
I'm intrigued by the music because I know you said you were looking for speakers, it was a prank,
Yeah.
etc. Like to your own ears. So sometimes, like you hear some music and you know it's coming from a certain direction, a certain position, etc. How clear was the source of that music to you? Was it?
So on the drive up, it was distant enough, like it wasn't crystal clear, that I mistook it for being farther away at the military base. And then when I was there, it sounded muffled. So, like, if you were driving really fast in the tram, which you're not supposed to do, but maybe we did, if you were driving really fast, I could see how you wouldn't have heard it. But she would always slow down around the curve towards on McPherson, towards Jackson Circle, because she was going to say goodnight to him. So it was slightly muffled. It wasn't crystal clear. And once I got closer, I was like, there's no way this is carrying from the military base. It's here.
So you've mentioned the drums. Now, drums to me, I've had instances with drums in the past. The most scary thing ever. I'm sure if you listen to the podcast, you'll hear me talk about that. My experience with the drums was a very, very angry, evil presence. So what you're saying is it was a very benevolent presence. Now, I'm just interested in what the feelings were to you personally when you were not only hearing these drums. Did you actually feel any vibrations inside of your body?
No, because he only played the drums when I was leaving, or on, I think, the opposite side of where he was. They felt like his way of communicating, you know, in Arlington. And if you ever go there, I always tell people, and I would yell at people, don't bring any of your tools. It's so disrespectful. Like, it's a very special place, at least in the US. So I would never bring anything that I could record on or anything like that. So I felt like it was his way of trying to tell me to go nicely, like, hey, you're kind of in my space. But it didn't vibrate. It was too far away for any like type of deep feeling other than they just sounded so sad and lonely, I guess.
And was this the only time that you've heard drums from that location?
No, I would most of the times when we passed, if we yelled goodnight, I would say about half of the times you could hear the drums. Or
Wow.
it's really just a drum. It's just him and his drum. But, you could hear it on the approach, and he would usually either stop and it would pick back up again as you left. And I think he's just walking around the circle playing his drum.
Okay, so Cat's here. He's more of the scientist, let's say. He's trying to find a scientific explanation for this event, what you're explaining.
Mm-hmm.
Now, he's looking for one story that's just going to blow him away. And we do intend in time, hopefully, to go and visit some places. What would you think would be the chances if Cat came to that location and was going around at the same sort of time as you're explaining now? What would be the chances of him hearing those drums?
50%.
There you go, Cats.
Well, yeah, no, that sounds great.
But good luck being in there then.
It is fascinating to me. The whole thing is fascinating because it's not something that science can disprove. You know what I mean? Science can't disprove the existence of, spirits as you call them or whatever. So I'm not starting from a position that they don't exist at all. But I suppose science can prove that something totally unexplainable is happening, I suppose. And that's what I'm looking for. That would be fascinating to me if I could go somewhere and just experience something that I think, wow, I have no idea what's going on here. And it sounds amazing. So your the tourists, the people you take around,
Mm-hmm.
how often do they come back with stories of seeing or hearing things?
It's interesting. It's not as often as you would think. I always felt like the spirits at Arlington knew they were tourists and would kind of stay out of their way, except for the oldest section, Section 1, which had deaths from the mid-19th century when the cemetery was originally started. You would mostly get the stories out of there or the old, I guess they called it the Lee Mansion, but I will leave historic inaccuracies aside. There used to be a mansion up there and some unfortunate slavery ties. And so there would most often be ghost stories from the mansion or Section 1 of the cemetery. And I would do, I did maybe, they're about 45-minute tours. And if I only worked in the cemetery, I could do 8, 9, 10 a day. And I would think, every third tour, somebody would be like, hey, did you see that? Or was there somebody in that section or something like that? So frequently, but not as often as I was seeing them.
And to the paying public who are coming to have a look at the graveyard, are the ghost stories known to them? Is it like a well-known thing in the area?
No. And like I said, we're the people who work there are very protective. And so we try to keep ghost hunters out and just want everybody to be respectful. So it's not like we go through an entire list of every ghost that we've ever seen there. It would take a very long time. But I do know people believe it's haunted. How could it not be? And they usually gravitate towards Section 1 or the old mansion.
So the stories that the guests do come back with do tend to be focused on the same places?
Yes.
I also find it interesting that you say that the ghosts seem to, be fully aware of what's going on, because if they're a tourist, they, will avoid them, and they only seem to react to the people that are protecting them. It's a very weird family-like setup, isn't it? It's like
Yes.
weird family thing. I don't even know how to explain it, but it feels like that. Like you've got an interaction with them, they've got an interaction with you. They trust you, you trust them. And you just hang out together, play drums together.
Yeah, drum circle, It's there are darker energies there. And I always felt awkward to go in those areas, but there was never a reason to. So I wouldn't say they're all peachy, happy haunts. Most of them are sad or lonely or confused. But I know they feel safe, so they stay. I don't know, it's not my place to pass anyone on, but they are safe and protected there.
Well, is there anything else you'd like to add? Is there any other stories that jump out at you? Or is that just for now, is that enough that you want to talk about?
I mean, I can mention a couple others, but I won't give sections. I remember probably the one that shook me the most. I mentioned I was there when a lot of the burials for Operation Enduring Freedom and Operation Iraqi Freedom were occurring. They actually started, they didn't start, but their sections, they broke ground in some new sections of the cemetery, and that hadn't been done in several years. Most of the time, they'll fill in sections of that are already containing graves, but they had to break new earth, and something shifted. According to the older workers, I came right as that was happening. They said something shifted, the energy shifted in the cemetery once that started happening. And the average burials went up from about 25 a day to closer to 30. And there was just this always constant drain and just feeling of something heavy, especially around those sections. And I remember there was this very kind family that just wanted to pay their respects to, I believe it was their cousin who had just been buried in one of the new sections. And so I had to tell them that there was no traffic allowed without permission because it was too active. And so I told them to go back to the visitor center, go to this location, talk to them, see if you can pay your respects. But you can't do it when they're active burials, which is what was going on at the time. And so they said, okay, thank you. And then the older male came back and he was a little huffy with me. And he's like, well, there are people over there now. And I said, respectfully, sir, there are burials, right? Of course there are. He goes, no, over there. And he kind of pointed, and there was somebody standing in a section where they shouldn't be. And I said, thank you so much. I will go let them know, or I'll let one of the old guard. The old guard is the military unit that does the burials at Arlington Cemetery. And so it's like, I can let one of them know. And they're usually on horseback. So he was like, fine. And he kind of stomped off. And, I can't even imagine what he was going through. So I went and I told my driver, hey, somebody's over in that section. And she goes, no, there's not. And I was like, wait, what do you mean? No, like it's right over there. She goes, Meg, turn around and look. And nobody was there. And I looked at the driver and he looked at me and I was like, somebody was there. He goes, yeah, sure. Not living. And we just moved on. So there was always, you'd be seeing shadow figures. I've never seen a full apparition there. And in the older section 1, I hated going there because whatever was there liked to play with my hair. I had really long hair at the time. And if I was going through section 1 to check for kids, because that's where the teenagers like to hide, because they had huge gravestones or they'd be really long or weird kind of sculptures. And so I would have to actually get out and walk through the graves, which I'm superstitious, so I don't like to step on the graves, which was impossible there. And I would always be feeling like I was being followed and something would be playing with my hair. So not evil, but didn't like being touched necessarily. But those are the two I'll tell you about. Yeah.
Wow. So, yeah, seems like a very active place for sure. But I do want to talk about the religious aspect here. But I don't want to go into it too much, obviously. But does it give you any kind of confidence in like a life after death?
I think I am not personally religious. My stance has always been energy is circular. And so there's always energy within the earth, within the things that surround us, within people. And so it gives me faith is a weird word if I'm not religious, but faith that my energy can live on circularly, and whether or not I choose to let it go or to stay. I think that that's what I believe.
Okay. Diplomatic answer.
Why, thank you.
But it must make you wonder, when you are surrounded by what you think of or what you deeply believe are spirits, and other people are seeing these spirits. It must make you think that, there's a comfort in that, that things do live beyond.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's obviously these are spirits that had unfinished business, or they weren't ready to go, or they wanted to stay. And so, yeah, 100%. It makes me, I guess it makes me feel better but it's comforting.
That's the word I was looking for. Yeah, that's the word I was looking for. Right, well, I don't know. Is there anything else you want to ask, Cats?
I mean, I want to go back to the sounds, I suppose. Maybe if I've got a question to ask that, you didn't see anything, you didn't feel the vibration of the drums, but like you could feel the source of that sound for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Where would you say the sound was coming from then? Where would you? How far away from you would you say the source of that was?
So there's a really big in Confederate circle. There's a really big. It's called the Confederate Memorial. I think it's been quite a few decades, and it's sizable. So I would say if I was laying down, it would maybe be 9. I'm short, so 9-10 feet diameter, maybe bigger. And then there's 2 concentric circles of headstones of Confederates that are buried in Arlington. There might be a third if memory serves. And so 20 feet away, it was never next to me. It was always almost opposite me, which is why I thought Dottie was being a jerk and punking me. So it wasn't close. The spirit never got right in my face. He seemed very shy, but it would have been a good distance for me as compared to up in my face.
Well, I'm happy with the story so far, and I'm looking forward to seeing what Cats is going to try and come up with to explain this one.
You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to spend a few days researching the graveyard, researching stories that maybe people have left on TripAdvisor, and see what I can marry up. See, because I'm really hoping that the correlation is really strong, because that's the kind of stuff I'm looking for. So yeah, I've really enjoyed this story, and because it's such a famous place that lots of people go to, yeah, I'm really looking forward to delving into a bit of research here. So thank you so much, Meg, for coming on and telling that.
My pleasure.
Meg, thanks so much for coming on. Really, really enjoyed that story. Now is the time in the podcast where myself and Ranty retire to the pit to see what we can make of your story. Now, personally, I think I'm going to need a bit of time to ponder over this one. So, Ranty, do you mind going first?
Yeah, thanks for passing that over to me there, Cats. I really enjoyed the story, I have to say. And what makes this more special to me is the fact that it is such an ongoing story with so many different people that are involved with this. Meg isn't alone with what she's saying here. She's saying that all the people that work in the cemetery, all the guides that go around there and take people on these tours, they all know what is happening in that cemetery. They're all aware of these different ghosts in different areas, and in some way they are friendly with them. Some would say even like family. I think I alluded to that in the stream. I think I actually said, the way you're coming across, it's like you've got some kind of special feeling with these people, like they're still there even though they're not there, but they are there. So this whole thing is so good. I enjoyed this. I really want to go. I think you and I should definitely try and get a trip over there at some point and see if we can record anything. It would be great if we could. She said that 50% of the time there's a good chance that you're going to hear these drums playing. Well, that'll do for me. I think that's a trip worthwhile going for, at least. But as for the podcast, what can I say? I think everything was said on the podcast. I think Meg hit it completely on the head that she was no more than 20 feet away from this noise, and the noise was there. It was nowhere else it was coming from. There was no contraptions around. There was nobody playing pranks on her, and she was hearing this all the time. So, ghost confirmed. I'm definitely saying this is definitely believable, and other people should perhaps go and check it out too. What do you think, Kat?
Well, look, the Arlington Cemetery is such a famous place, isn't it? And it carries so much historical significance. We have dead presidents there. We have famous soldiers. There are thousands and thousands of bodies there. And something like that is always going to be a prime source to be the origin of ghost stories. Not to mention the effect that will have on tourism and the money that will bring into the area. And as much as I'd love to believe that this place was haunted, and I genuinely believe that Meg has experienced some of the things she said she's experienced, I think this is more likely a case of self-affirmation. I think if you work in a place where you're hearing bangs at night or noises, but people around you are telling you, oh, that's just a ghost in that area, and you start telling yourself, oh, I've heard the ghost again tonight, and then you hear another bang, and I've heard the ghost again. Have you really heard a ghost? Is there any evidence that's a ghost? Or are you just hearing a bang and keep telling yourself over and over and over again that you've heard a ghost? And then, 5, 10, 15 years down the line, you say, oh, I've heard thousands of ghosts. And then you're passing that on to other colleagues and tourists, etc. So as much as it's a great story, and I'd love to believe the ghost, to me, There just isn't the evidence there that something actually paranormal has taken place. Now, don't get me wrong. I would love to hear from other people who've been to Arlington Cemetery for them to perhaps pass on their experiences, and maybe we might find two people who've been there at separate times that have had exactly the same experience that might add a little bit more weight and significance to today's story. But I do think it's a great story, and I think Meg 100% believes what she's seen is or heard is paranormal. For myself, there's just not quite enough there. However, isn't it brilliant to have a place like that is so historically and culturally significant, that's surrounded by these ghost stories? It makes for a cracking place to visit, don't you think?
Yeah, okay. So I am going to take on board what you said there about evidence, because, evidence really is thin on the ground. I can't fault you for saying that, because it's true. We just have the word of Meg that came on and told us this story. However, having listened to the story and how eloquently she talks and the way she talked about it in a matter-of-fact way, I've got to say that, did we need the evidence? Did we need to actually see something? Did we actually need to hear something to take it at face value? I don't think we did. I think it was a great story. I think it was told very well. And I think there's something there. I think that's you and I, definitely need to go there sometime soon. Maybe this year, maybe next year, depending on the you-know-what. But if we can get over there, what a great stakeout to do. See if we can record some drums from the drummer boy.
It would be amazing, wouldn't it? A live from Arlington Cemetery podcast. That would be absolutely superb. And, I think now you mention it, there are plenty of haunted locations in the UK as well. It would be great to do a live show from any of those places.
It definitely sounds good. It's something that we might work on this coming year. We can try and sort out some logistics about what's going on. And, maybe we can get something together. Maybe we can work something out and get something on the YouTube channel, perhaps something visual.
Sounds like a plan. But until then, I think I'm going to retire myself into the pit. It's been a great first season. I've really enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to capping it off with the Easter Live special next week. And I think that's all I've got to say, other than thank you to all the listeners, because without you, well, there'd be no point in doing this, would there? So thank you so much.
Yeah, exactly. And let me just say, because we do have thousands of followers now, funnily enough, and this has all started off from scratch. We've only been doing this a few months, and to every single one of those thousands of followers that we have, I really do appreciate you sticking around and listening to our content. It really does make a huge difference. I also want to thank the Patreons, people that are supporting us on Patreon, because the money that you give towards the show really helps in our production. It allows us to use places like Zencaster and Buzzsprout for our streaming services. So we really, really do thank you for that too. And lastly, we will be back in about 4 weeks. But fear not, there will be one last show to put out, and that will be next Sunday. If you get the chance, listen to us on YouTube. We will be putting a live stream out there. So if you're listening on one of the streaming apps, then you can go and find us on YouTube. Look up Almost Unbelievable on YouTube, subscribe to us there, and you'll see us live next Sunday. As for now, that'll do, I think. And thank you, Meg, again for the excellent story, and we'll see you all in the next season. Take care.
Goodbye.